This is actually part 4 of the Evil Twin project, and I have a couple little tips to share. If you have a GS or a bike that's similar from this era, I think you'll find these tips very useful. Now, I had an idea as part of this project where we have two GSs, very similar. Even a one's an 83. The Philly bike is an 83. They're from the same series of bikes. Now, what was funny is when I purchased this bike down in Philadelphia with Ray, and we trucked it home in his minivan, the gentleman told me that I bought it from him. He said, "Oh, those carbs have been reworked. They have a jet kit in them. The bike's very fast." So what I did in the process of spending the last couple of days that I've had an hour here and an hour there, didn't shoot it on video, but we will in the future the next time we do it. I removed the carbs in the airbox off of the donor bike. Now, a lot of bikes from this era shared interchangeable parts, and a lot of the 4-cylinder bikes had carbs that were very, very similar. So, to be honest, I've done these carbs when my late good friend Kenny Augustine was alive. He talked me through about 5 little things. We raised the needles, we upped the main jet, we modified an airbox, we tried pod filters. But you know what? I always liked the way the bike ran with the stock air cleaner. And it wasn't that it was a power issue, it was as it takes the throttle, it just was a lot smoother, more predictable in corners. So the issue really is when you go to take the carbs off, of course you have to take a whole bunch of other stuff off to get to the carbs in the airbox. But in my case, I found something that, well, let me just explain how this project went. Now, Luciano will remember this well. Luciano and I purchased this bike, brought it back to his garage, and the guy that we bought it from rode it up and down the street, shifted and whatever. And so that was not an issue, but we parked it in his garage overnight. It leaked all the gas out onto the floor. So it had a carb issue. Well, I'm not going to go into it right now, but what I did as a process of doing that, Luciano showed me his technique for cleaning carbs, which I'll show on a future video, but how to get them to stop leaking too. Now, this is really an engineering issue that you have with this particular bike, and I always say this bike is very easy to work on. I love working on this bike. There's one job I dread, when you have to take the carburetors off. Here's the issue. This airbox, you can't take this off. The frame, you have to take the carburetors off first. This does not slide back far enough that you can take it out. So here's what has happened over 35 years and over doing this many, many times. These parts are now hard as a rock. They are really work hardened, and I'll show that up close and personal on the parts that I took off the Philly bike. Now, you would think this is not a big deal, but it is a big deal. When you go to take a bike apart and you want to take, you can't push this far enough back, you can't push this forward, and you can't slide the carbs out. It's very, very difficult. Now, it's very, very easy, or I shouldn't say, it makes it easier when these rubber parts are all nice and soft and nice and new. So what I did, before I even started the job, I knew this was going to happen, smart as I am. I went onto the Partzilla and found out these parts are still available. A set, the 4 in the back and the 4 in the front, are just about $100 altogether from Partzilla. So before and let me explain, when I go to swap the carbs that and I don't know that I'm going to swap them. I'm certainly not going to swap them in cold weather. This is a warm weather job, and I'll explain why. In the warm weather, those rubber things get a lot softer. Now, it certainly doesn't mean you can't do it. What it means is it's a bear to do. And I'm sure Aaron with his GS and Tim when he had his GS, anybody that's done these GSs, that is on a hot day, if the rubber is soft, it's almost a good analogy is like mounting a tire. On a hot day, when the tire is soft, piece of cake. Cold day, tires are rock. Now, part of what happened with this project, the Evil Twin project, I had thought, I don't know, about a month ago, I had planned this out in my mind. I wanted to, for a long time, swap the body parts maybe every winter. Next year, put the blue parts back, the year after that. So kind of kind of like a fun thing anyway, no big money. But at the end of last year, the bike had a little bit of an idling issue, and not a big deal. The plugs, I put new plugs in, it made it better. Did a couple of little tweaks, everything, it got better, and it's rideable, but it's just not as crisp as it was. And I know what happens. Parts wear out and things get old, and it's like old underwear. But one of the choices I had, and I thought, ooh, you know, I have that whole set of carbs off the other bike, and when the warm weather comes, I'll take a day and swap them out. So there's actually two parts to this job. And I already got the first part done. I have the carbs off, they're down in the cellar, and on a separate video I'll show cleaning them and what I do to clean them and make sure they're not leaking gas before I install them. Now, really critical on this bike, that you don't install carbs and put all those parts back, turn the gas on, and they leak. So number one thing, I have my spare auxiliary gas tank. I'll test down in the cellar over the sink that they don't leak at the end. But I'll do a thorough clean out, and again, I'll do that on a separate video. The part of this that's going to be interesting is when I have the other set of carbs ready, and I want to do it on a warm day. See, here's the whole thing. I always like to do these jobs as efficiently as possible. I want to get 4 or 5 more rides on a bike the way it is, and then spend a day, maybe a rainy, warm day, swapping out the carbs, see if they were any better. But it'll serve another purpose. I can then take these carbs and do a thorough clean out. And these are the carbs again. They have bigger main jets, the needles are raised, whatever. I don't remember. Kenny did a couple other little tricky things there. He sent me parts from California, but it'll be nice to be able to compare what may not even be a jetted set of carbs to this set of carbs, and it's a free thing since I already have the carbs. So the point is, once you have the carbs off, of course, everything is fun and games. But let me tell you what I tried, and let me show you a few things about working on a GS since I've got 35 years of experience. Some little things that may or may not help you out. And by the way, one of the things, and again, thank you, Vince, one of the things that makes this possible, I got the fittings now to do this job, and they were in the box all along. I didn't realize those were the right size. I have all the rubber parts out, the manifolds and the fuel lines, and I'm going to show one of the things I tried to do here. I got this ready. So now one of the things this can that we made on one of the previous videos, one of the things this can is really good for, I can hang this up over the sink, put the carbs over the sink, hook up the fuel, and see if any of them leak. And it's a lot easier to do that in a cellar that's 65 degrees instead of a garage that's 18. Now, one of the things that's really handy, of course, when you have the manual, goes without saying. Once you have the carbs off the bike, and again, now I'm laughing, but boy, it was a job getting these off. Now, there's several things, and I'm just going to show this real close. These are one of the rubber boots. That what happens is you have 4 of these, and they have to go onto the back of the carbs all at the same time. When you install this, you have to line this up, push this in, and 4 of them at the same time. Is that easy to do? No. If you have a helper, a lot easier. Now I see this bike that I bought, I see the guy already did what I do. And when I get the new ones from Partzilla, I'm just using this as an example. I make like a funnel with a brand new razor. And so this part, I'm not running into 2 square edge parts. Put a little bit of wheel bearing grease. Yeah, that would make it just a little bit easier, but you still have to line up 4 at the same time. Same thing with the front. It sounds like that would be easy, but there's 2 lefts and 2 rights. They have a little bit of an angle going each way. Now, the first thing I always check, and I'm just showing this because we're just playing with carburetors today, I make sure all the diaphragms are okay. If that slides down, I got good diaphragms. Now, if one of them comes boom, you know you have a bad diaphragm. If one sticks, you know you've got some contamination or something on it. So that's one of the first things. Now, the other thing is, as I take these apart, and Luciano taught me this a long time ago, you got to have the manual. Now, when we bought the FCR, we took the bike apart, and that bike leaked. We put brand new, the little things with the Viton tip, it still leaked. We did so, it still leaked. And then Luciano, to his credit, one of the reasons I think he's just a great friend, he went out on eBay and bought me a set of carbs with his money. With his money. Can you imagine? And I came up the next day or a couple days later, and I looked, the bike didn't leak. Boom, starts right up. And he gave me the old carbs, and he said, throw these away. Well, I didn't throw them away. I kept them for parts. But it taught me a very valuable lesson. A very, very valuable lesson. And on an FZR, it's I don't want to say bitch. It's a bitch to get the carbs off. Because they're mounted this way, and you can't get in at anything. So, but here's the whole point, the whole thing in a nutshell. If you can work on the carbs in a nice warm workshop, if you live in California or Florida, it's always warm. But working under controlled environmental conditions, you know, everything is a lot easier than if you're working out in a tundra. Out in a tundra, your fingertips turn into marshmallows and stuff. Anyway, so here's what I learned, and it's in the course of taking this apart, I kind of figured this out on my own, but I don't know, there may be some truth in advertising to this, but there's some of it is definitely true. Well, once you pull the airbox apart, you realize the back part comes off that has the filter, but this part, because of the shape, the frame is right here, you can't back this part up. So, now, once these, and they should be soft, I'm going to show this up close and personal, these get snapped in there, and then this ring gets popped inside, gets pushed in to hold that out against the wall. Well, that's a nice design. Everything here is pretty much the way I would have designed it, except for one thing. In 35 years, these rubber parts turn into concrete. Now, here's one, even though it's an old piece of rubber. This doesn't get hot and cold, hot and cold. It doesn't heat cycle. So this rubber is still nice and flexible. Well, that's the back of the airbox, by the way. But these parts and the manifolds, it's unbelievable. I don't think you can imagine how hard they get. They really get. I was almost to the point where I was going to cut them off. And I know, I don't want to tell the secrets, but I know Luciano has cut some airboxes off bikes that you couldn't get the parts off. So almost every bike that I know of, somewhere in the intake system, has some rubber parts. The rubber parts are wonderful. They isolate heat-wise. The engine is hot. You don't want the carburetors 200 degrees. The engine is 200, 150, 180. So this is an insulator. The problem is it's made out of material. It probably is a good insulator, but it doesn't, like anything in life, like underwear, it doesn't last forever. Now, here's what you can see. This part of the thing is nice and soft and spongy. This part here, yeah, look at this. And it's even got a little crack in it. But this part up here is absolutely, I can't even demonstrate how hard this is. That's not going to move at all. So what happens when I go to back up my carburetor, it's already in there. I can't back it up. That's the problem. So I thought, well, the way I got these out, and this was my, I don't call this a trick even. I took a heat gun. I heated them to the point I thought I was going to set the bike on fire. I wasn't happy about that either. I don't like having heat and gasoline all in the same spot. I guess I could have drained the carbs with that would have been a smart idea. But the heat, first thing, you can smell them. They have a rancid smell when you do this. But that softens them right up. Look at that. Wow. But the only problem is now, you put this back on the bike. This is a 35-year-old part. And what I did, for a demonstration, I let it sit overnight. It went right back to being a rock. You can't even move it. So what happens? You have two scenarios. If you can keep the thing warm, if you can understand how that, oh, this one is unbelievable. This, you got to show this. That almost like steel. But now the reason I'm showing this is I had a brilliant idea that I will try in the future. I was watching YouTube like I do practically every day, and there was a thing about never replace your windshield wipers. And they sell a fluid that softens windshield wipers, and every 6 months you spray it on your windshield wipers, and supposedly it keeps them soft. Well, I couldn't find it in AutoZone. I'll be keeping an eye out for it. I thought maybe you could spray some of that on there every 6 months. Now see, here we are. Now remember that part was so, look at it now. But now, imagine you have 4 of these, and that's why we try to share this information. Before you go ripping a GS apart, think about, it'd be nice to have 2 friends with 2 hairdryers heating all these parts up before you even try it. Or just move to the Bahamas. So that's one reason why I decided that I'd postpone this job, this part of the job, till spring or summer, or just like a tire day. Wait for a 90-degree day to do this. And number 2, I hope the parts I get from Partzilla, and I'll share that, because some of the parts from Partzilla may be 20 years old too. Who knows? Maybe they're already hard, but I have a feeling the rubber doesn't get hard. This I don't know about. The rubber itself is soft. It's where it heat cycles back and forth. Certain spots depart, and it's usually the bottom where it's exposed to the engine to heat the most. They get like a rock. So if every 35 years you have to spend $100 to renew those rubber parts, and I know, again, I'm using some information that Luciano has shared. I know a lot of bikes that I've been to his house and he's replaced rubber parts, and I've always thought, boy, that's a great idea. Now, in the interest of just sharing general information, I know the people that like antique bikes, all these 4 historic bikes that I have, are all subject to the same rules of gravity. There are no fuel injection bikes that are historic. You have to deal with carburetors. Carburetors are a pain, but like points, they always seem to get you home at the end of the day. Now, you got to show this. There are lefts, there are rights. These are a lot thicker, so they're a lot more difficult. Let me just get a rag here. Get some of the goop off. What I had done in the course of trying to get these off, soaked them with WD-40. I'm not sure that helped a lot. What would have helped is having 7 friends here that were octopuses and could get their hands, little baby fingers, and hold a heat gun and do 2 screwdrivers at the same time. But I'm used to working alone, so I always try to improvise this. Now, you look at the top of them. They say which are the right, which are the left. They have a little bend in them. But now, I tried this. Well, I did fuel line. Let's just do a simple thing. These fuel lines, if we were going to reuse them, and we're not, believe me, when you go to put this on, this is so hard. There is no way you would break your fingers getting that on. So I know this from just a lifetime of trying to use old stuff. So many times what I would do is cut that end off, heat it up, and now look at that. Wow, look at that. Now that allows me to get the fuel line on, get the clamp. I really don't like these wire. I like to have real clamps with screws. But anyway, that's a good way. Soften your fuel line up before you break the filter or trying to get it on a GS. You got to get the fuel line down, and the vacuum lines. And where it's bulged up like this, it's a good idea to just cut that off, heat it, and then get a nice tight fit on it. That's definitely good technology. So I just wanted to see for my own benefit. Now that there is no way, you need pliers. You can't even pinch it with pliers. These things get so hard. However, to their credit, none of them have really cracks or vacuum leaks. And I thought, when I borrowed that tool from Vince, I wanted to know if these were going to have, I suspected they might have a vacuum leak. Well, these are not the ones that are on the bike. But anyway, I want to see for myself. Now, I'd love to find out if they make a material, some of our friends and I'm still in touch with some of the people from the aerospace industry. There's probably something that they use on aircraft or something to keep the rubber soft. That windshield washer stuff, I thought, wow, that's an AutoZone thing. That probably would be cool. Just spray some of that on every once in a while, but again, I don't know. And I certainly am trying never to pass on bad information. Now look at this. Now the only trouble is, and what I ought to do is my own test. If you do this, if you could put the like a microwave, like that thing that they have at or you could just buy new parts. And Luciano, I know I can hear him in the background saying, just buy the $100 worth of rubber parts. And you know what? He's right. Now, one of the things you might be able to pick up off some of my videos, and of course we make the videos with the idea of sharing information and having a few laughs, having some fun. One of the things I try never to do is once I have a bike apart, like I would never want to take this apart and not do something that a year later I got to take the bike apart again to do it. Now, having this gas can, and that cost no money to make, that was great. Borrowing a tool from Vince, no money at all. We have to assemble it. It does have mercury, so I've been waiting right to the last minute to do it. And I'm going to do that on a warmer day in this brutal cold that we've been having. Getting rubber parts from Partzilla, I'm hoping they're going to come, and the guy's not going to send me an email that they're not in stock, because they said they had them. Having a factory manual, one of the things I want to do when I check this set of carbs, and I'll do that on a separate video, I'll pull them all apart, clean them, reassemble them, show how Luciano showed me how to do it anyway, and it's worked perfectly for all the years. And the only thing I've had an issue that I really had beaten myself to death over was putting new Viton little tips in here, and it still leaked. And then we did that about 3 times before we resolved it. But anyway, so if we're gearing up toward being able to balance the carbs on all our 4-cylinder carbureted bikes, having some fresh rubber on the air filter come spring, and maybe having a spare set of carbs that may or may not have a jet kit. When you buy things from people, you never know what you're getting. It's always, there may be no maiden jets in this. But I did ride this bike, even though what this bike has is a bad crankshaft seal on the brake side, and it leaks oil. So to replace the crankshaft seal, you got to split the cases and everything. But here's the good news, I guess. When I did ride the bike, it really, I wasn't afraid to get on the gas, that's for sure, and go through the gears. And it did feel fast. And probably these are a stock set of carbs. But we'll find out the next time we get to work in the shop. Man, Luciano just emailed me today saying those parts, the extra set of risers that he got for $12, are in the mail. We'll finish up that project, install it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope I got a couple of useful tips across. Don't burn yourself with that heat gun. Anyway, again, thanks for watching. And let's hope this Evil Twin project, we have a lot more little detailed things we're going to be doing, but this is really the 4th video in the set. Anyway, again, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.